we set aside about 45 minutes for our conversation, and I'm excited for this Ask Me Anything question and answer style conversation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Susan Durfee, and I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Model 55. We are an interior design firm that creates the ultimate sense of home for your residents. We help you create beautiful amenity spaces as well as model apartments, respite suites, or short-term furnished rental units that say home. We work across multiple verticals within the multifamily housing industry, and we provide our services all across the continental United States. So thank you all for joining us. And I am pleased to be joined by Pete Oliver from SaleFish. SaleFish is a Sandler training franchise, and Pete has been doing this for a very long time, and in fact, SaleFish recently won Sandler's Summit Award, which was given to the top revenue-producing franchise in the world. So when I say that we have a wealth of knowledge on this conversation, I mean it in many facets. So I'd like to, turn it over to you, Pete, and please tell us about yourself and tell us about SaleFish.
Awesome. Well, Sue, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. Should be fun. It's nothing better than to talk about how to execute from a sales perspective, and happy to be a part of the conversation today.
Thanks.
So as you mentioned, SaleFish is a Sandler training affiliate. We have two offices, one in Boston and one in Maui, Hawaii, which happens to be where I'm at right now. And we spend our days helping organizations succeed. And we do that by helping them implement sales methodologies.
Excellent. So you just mentioned that you are currently in Maui. I understand you were raised in New York. You followed your heart to Boston because you were an avid Red Sox fan, yet there you are sitting in Maui wearing your Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah.
How did that happen? How'd you get from New York to Boston to Maui? Oh my.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely purposeful. We did it because we wanted to do it. My wife and I honeymooned in Maui 11 years ago, and we fell in love with the culture and the island, and we wanted to retire here. And that was the goal. The goal was to drop our kids off at college and spend 3 months a year in Hawaii. And our kids are 7 and 8 years old right now, and we've been here for 2 years. So we kind of sped the plan up a little bit and decided that we only live once, and why not live our dream? So we sold our house and cars and vacation home and put everything in a container and came to Maui 2 years ago.
Wow. So I recall when we first started working together, one of the first starting points of this whole Sandler philosophy was the vision board.
Yeah.
And you shared with us your vision board, and on it was Maui. And now here you are. And for those of you who may not have heard earlier in the conversation, Pete has a tea time at 12. So that's a wonderful, wonderful. We've been working together for over a year now, Pete, you and and I often reflect on one of the first comments that you made, that we as sales professionals don't go off to college and major in selling or sales. It is a role of, being any other kind of major in any kind of business environment. And my question to you is, what do you believe are some of the keys to being a successful salesperson?
Well, you're right. I mean, I think a lot of people have head trash over the profession in general, because I think we've probably been sold to by somebody that wasn't as professional as we would want to be. So there's some negative connotations when it comes to salespeople, and we've all seen. I mean, growing up, I remember vividly people trying to call my parents and them hanging up on them, or them going to a store and brushing off the salesperson. So we tend to stereotype that into that role. And So I think first off, we have to get over that head trash. And I think the people that are good at sales are doing it for the right reasons, because they want to help people. They want to
Mhm.
enable somebody else's ability to accomplish a goal or solve a challenge. And if you go into it with that mindset, that's obviously helps a ton. And so, I mean, number one, just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And then after that, it's, I'm sure you and I've talked about the success triangle a ton. And I believe that is the greatest gift Sandler has given me, is that success triangle. And it's helped me in my sales career, but it's also helped me in other aspects of my life. And I mentioned a little bit about mindset. So the triangle has 3 points. There's attitude, there's behavior, and there's technique. And if we want to get better at anything in life, then we look at those 3 points of the triangle and we can build a plan.
Sure. So can you give me an example of actually working on, your behaviors, your attitudes, and the technique? Can you walk us through what like a real life example might look like?
Sure. Yeah. So let me tell you the earring story with my daughter Brooke. It's always a good one to drive this point home.
Yep.
So, like I said, they can't go by where I don't think about how to apply those 3 points of the triangle to something you're trying to improve on. And so I'll tell you a quick story. A few years ago, our daughter, she has her ears pierced and had since she was 6 months old. And every once in a while, my wife would make sure that the ear holes stayed open, and she would put new earrings in my daughter's ears. And she was doing it with our older daughter, Elena. And then Brooke disappeared into the bathroom, comes back a couple of minutes later, and she's holding her ear. And I'm like, I knew something was wrong. And she was 2 at the time. So I look in her ear, and she had taken a pearl earring without the backing in it. So basically like a spear with a little slippery ball on the end of the spear. And she tried to put it in her earring hole, but instead she shoved it down her ear.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, this is not good. This is obviously terrible. So Lisa's like, don't worry, I'll get it out. She gets the tweezers, goes in, and the metal tweezers made the pearl slip and then go deeper into her ear. So we rushed her to the emergency room, and long story short, the doctor was amazing. He took this Q-tip with, and he put super glue on the end of the wood side of a hospital Q-tip. And he went in with the super glue, and we had to hold Brooke's head solid. And he came out with the earring after a few attempts. And so I'm on my way home, and I'm thinking about the success triangle, and it's just where my brain goes. And I'm kind of laughing to myself. And Lisa's like, Pete, what's so funny? And she's like, well, so I told her, I go, well, her attitude was to do it. There was no self-limiting beliefs, and she she obviously didn't have any head trash. She felt like
Mhm.
she could actually do it. And the behavior was good. She tried. It wasn't like she didn't attempt it. So she got the checkbox there. Her technique was just terrible. That was the problem. So if we want to get better at anything, you look at those 3 parts of the triangle, and you can figure out where your baseline is and what you need to work on. So
Sure.
that's not a sales related example, but there's plenty of sales related examples we can give you as too.
Right. So you just mentioned something there that has become a big part of my education is third party stories and how important third party stories are in the selling process. Could you share more on that?
Well, yeah, I'm curious. Sue, can you answer that? I'm curious. What would you think would be the answer to that question?
I would. So through third party stories, it makes it more relatable instead of me as the salesperson telling you the story about me. What you see is, Sue, you are a salesperson. But if I tell you about client Amanda, whom experienced these challenges, and from what I'm hearing, Pete, you sound like you have these same challenges as well. And this is how we helped Amanda, and this is now, how successful Amanda is. You are more inclined to believe and have faith in Amanda's pain and then the success that she had in solving her pain.
Yeah, I mean, that's well said. I think one of those things that salespeople sometimes do is they fall in love with their own products and they start talking about their own features, the benefits, and it becomes a very myopic view on the world when in reality the world isn't about us, it's about our clients. So if we do a good job of leveraging third-party stories, we're keeping the conversation around basically what it could feel like to our clients. And because frankly, that's what they care about. They care about themselves, they care about the goals and the objectives that they're trying to go achieve. They really don't care about our stuff unless they have a problem. And if we can't articulate what that problem could sound like by leveraging third-party stories, then it makes the conversation much less effective.
Hmm. Which leads to a next tactic or part of the Sandler submarine is called pain. And I've learned through working with you and the organization that you need to uncover pain. And it's not just that surface level, in our case, in multifamily housing industry, I'm having occupancy challenges. Like that's the obvious pain. But to keep asking questions, working through the pain funnel to get to these lower, deeper levels of pain. So can you share a little bit more about um, questioning tactics or suggestions for us folks to continue down that pain path to really get to the heart of why they want to talk to us, and how we can help them uncover that what we're offering can help take away or remediate the pain.
Yeah, I mean, the visual I like to think about it, imagine your client's situation is like an iceberg, and then part of their pain is visible to themselves and to us as their partner, but there's a lot below the surface. So a surface level pain typically sounds a lot like what we do for a living. So if somebody came to us and said, like, let's just say for senior living, you have a daughter or a son of their parent coming to a facility saying, uh, we'd like to explore options for my father. And that is the surface level pain. So what might we do? We might start showing them options because that's what they asked for. They're looking for spaces for a significant other or a relative, but yeah, we don't know why they're there. So if you think about what's below the surface, it's the why behind the what. So
Mhm.
it's basically the impact of whatever problem that is. It's the reasons why it's there, it's the reasons why they care. And obviously the world that you play in is extremely personal. So it's not about filling a room. It's about something else. And we won't know that unless we ask. And that's when we get down below the surface and really understand the real reasons behind why somebody would want to change and then do something. So
Right. And then to add to that point, it's also very important to stop talking and listen more. So that whole 70-30% is, you talk 30% and let them talk 70%. So you can ask these questions and let them talk, and they will uncover or help them to uncover what that deep pain is that they're experiencing.
yeah, I mean, it sounds obvious, but I think a lot of times we just get so excited and we want to help that we might go to the solution too fast without understanding what's actually going on. And or we just may assume we may think we know what the reason is, but we don't ask. So it would almost be like, let's say you go to a doctor and the doctor comes in and doctor just, let's say you broke your foot or you think you broke your foot and you're at the doctor comes in, basically sits down and says, hey, do you see my diploma on the wall? I'm a really good doctor. I've operated 1,000 times. Let's go. Let's get you going right now because I'm really good at what I do. And and they don't ask any questions. They don't know how you might have broken it. You don't know how long it's been hurting for, didn't do any examination, but he just went straight to the prognosis without asking any questions. You're not going to feel very confident about that particular doctor. Same thing in sales. If we don't ask questions, we'll have zero credibility with our prospects and clients.
Right. So as a suggestion from you, when you are asking the questions, what do you think is a good signal that the prospect is done answering the questions? Is there a signal that you think they throw up?
Well, I think a lot of that, so there's a big difference between feeling like you're being interrogated and then feeling like you're having a conversation or potentially you're being interviewed.
Right.
So a lot of that is in the setup. Like if they come to us expecting a presentation and we're trying to shove a bunch of questions on the front end of it,
Yeah.
then they're going to get a little antsy. But
Yeah.
if we set it up the right way and we say something like, Sue, I appreciate you sharing a time with me. Typically an initial conversation like this, it's a learn and share conversation. Like to learn more about your environment, what you're trying to accomplish, what you're looking for, and then happy to share with you how we work with folks similar to you. Normally this conversation might last somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes. And I'm curious from your perspective, what would success for this meeting look like? And then it's a conversation and you set it up that way, you're going to have a lot more leeway to ask questions if you set it up like you're going to be asking questions.
Mm. The upfront contract.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you say something like toward the end of this discovery phase, you say something like, Sue, what else should I know? And then they don't have an answer for you, you're probably done. It's probably time to move on to the next phase in whatever your sales process looks like.
Sure. Okay. Another interesting concept that I learned from Sandler, and it was very uncomfortable in the beginning, was to go for the no. You know, we as sales folk are so inclined to get the yes that we sometimes don't see or want to hear what's around us, and giving the prospect permission to say no, it's not right, is definitely uncomfortable. Um, so could you give us an example of how that might be phrased in a conversation?
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. I was at a client event in Vegas back when we could actually travel
Go
a
to
couple of
client
years ago.
events.
And this gentleman, we were walking the floor of this client event, and there was like 1,000 people from my client there, and there were leaders and sales reps and technical folks, and I was walking around with one of the sales reps, and then this gentleman comes literally running up to the two of us at this vendor fair, and he goes, "Do you know Ashley?" Because I'm walking with her, and I was like, "Of course I do." And this gentleman was Ashley's client. And he goes, Ashley is by far the best sales rep that I've ever worked with. And I'm like, oh, I appreciate you sharing that with me. And why is that? I just trust her. I just trust her. I've always trusted her since day one. And I go, well, what can you share with me why you feel like that? What makes her so trustworthy to you? And he goes, well, she told me I could tell her no. And I'm like, what do you mean? And then he verbatim said what Ashley said 2 years prior, and had that big of an impact on him. So it sounds something like this. Like I would say it a few different ways. I'd say, Sue, typically by the end of a conversation like this, we'll have shared enough information for you and I to determine if there's a fit here. If there's not, it's okay. Are you comfortable letting me know if you don't believe there's a reason to keep talking?
Mhm.
And that's how you ask a client to tell you no, right? Another talk track might be, I'm guessing our guts will tell us either way if we need to keep going. If I don't
Mhm.
believe there's a fit, I'm happy to share that with you, and I'd appreciate it if you do the same thing. So
Mhm.
cool thing about doing that is, first of all, you're asking for the truth. And if we don't get the truth, then nothing really else matters. And the minute we're honest with our prospects and they know that we can take it if it's a no, they're going to be
Mhm.
more likely to give us the true scenario because they're not going to be worried about hurting our feelings.
Right.
So, in any relationship, frankly, you want the truth, and it's not
Okay.
always going to be a yes. So you might as well
Right.
call it out up front and make the clients comfortable.
Right. Not to mention also at the end of the day, it's a time saver. It gives you an opportunity to close the file and move on to someone who is interested, engaged, and wants to, have those conversations to further the relationship.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, absolutely. I
yeah,
mean, Sandler's got a saying, we'd rather have a quick no than a long think it over.
I know.
And I mean, there's nothing worse than dealing with these think it overs. That'll just kill your time management process. And
Great.
it's not like if you get a fast no, it's a no forever.
It's no
So
right now.
it's a no for now, which is fine. Move on.
Yep. Yep. You talked a lot about, or what I'm hearing from what you're saying is a lot of success in these conversations that we have has to do with preparation. And it's all, knowing who you're going to be speaking to and trying to determine as much about this entity as possible. And there are a number of different facets in understanding who the prospect is. Number one is disc style, which I learned through Sandler, so some of our other folks may know about it, but and mirroring. So could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think one of those, the first step in our process is making sure that we're having a real conversation with somebody. And you can't get there unless there's trust. And that happens in a few different ways. Some of it's commonality driven because there's a reason why we're talking. Maybe we were referred in, maybe they know we deal with clients similar to them, but there becomes an equal business stature element to it. And that will happen through commonality, it'll happen through trust. So the DISC model allows us to take that commonality to another level. I think we all grew up with the saying, I mean, my parents told me this, like treat people the way that you want to be treated, which is the golden
Mhm.
rule, obviously. But in sales, we want to treat people the way they want to be treated. So we may be big picture
Mhm.
thinkers, they may be detail. So if we don't know what they are, we're going to revert back to our comfort zone and we're going to go big picture. So we want to take that
Mhm.
commonality process to another level and then understand how people want to be communicated to. And it's not that we're changing our style, we're just enabling our client's style because that's what we want to do as salespeople. We don't want to convince anybody of anything. We want to enable their ability to make a decision, and we can't do that unless there's some common ground.
Mhm. It also creates safety and trust in the relationship as well. So if you have someone who is a steady relator, they're like this, they're not emotionally high and low, and then you have someone who is an I influencer who can be very emotional, high low. You, you don't want that person to be like, "Ooh, coming at me too hard." So it is very important to listen to how they're talking. Are they loud? Are they soft? So those are all important in creating rapport with your prospect.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people do that naturally. If you're going to be in a position where you're building relationships, whether it's through sales or some other profession, you probably do that somewhat naturally anyway.
Yeah.
So it becomes part of your creative subconscious. But every once in a while, you got to make that a conscious thought and then decide how you can purposefully map to somebody else's processes, decision making, communication styles, etc.
Yeah. So I got excited about personalities and mirroring. I failed to really talk about preparation. To be successful, you have to do your pre-work. And not only is it understanding disc style, but what do you think are some other key factors that we as sales professionals should understand prior to our phone call or our meeting?
Yeah, well, here's let me share with you two different types of sales reps. So there's, let's pretend you've been in your role for 10 years. There's, if you're a lifelong learner, you're constantly finding ways to get better. You know that you're good, but you want to get better. So you're constantly evolving your process. And that doesn't happen in the moment. It happens with the pre-work and the post-work. So you're getting ready to go on a call and you're saying to yourself, okay, what's one thing I want to make sure that I do? Is there anything that I need to do to challenge my comfort zone on this next call? And then you execute the call. And then at the end, you figure out, okay, what did I do well? What did I not do well? And then you evolve your process so that it continues to become muscle memory and your comfort zones expand. So if you're that type of rep, you're a lifelong learner, you actually have 10 years of experience. If you don't do that, you likely have had 1 year of experience 10 years in a row because you continue to repeat exactly what you did yesterday. For my trainings, every once in a while, I'll get somebody to come up to me when it's done and they'll be like, oh, Pete, that was a great refresher. So what they're telling me is they're a 1 year of experience, 10 year in a row type person because I just reminded them of something they should have done and didn't. Thanks for calling it out. I'm not going to change, but it was a good refresher of the things I didn't do and should have been doing. So a little tip there, if we end up working together at any point in time, don't say nice refresher because immediately I know these people are not willing to change, right?
Understand.
So
not a good investment there.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, that's the whole point of the pre-call plan is not only am I determining how I believe the meeting is going to go, like what are my goals, what's my home run, what's my double, but what are the questions that I believe the prospect or client's going to ask me, and what is my response going to look like? How am I going to set the agenda for the meeting? What are the questions I'm going to ask? So a lot of it boils down to preparation so that you're following your own system. And it's nothing better than executing a plan that you decided that you wanted to execute, right? And that's what the pre-call planning is all about.
And that's a home run. Even before the pre-call planner, there's activity. You have to do the activity. And in Sandler, we refer to it as cookbook. It's like the ingredients. What is the ratio of activity that I need to be successful? So it's a great exercise to like look back and see, what are the tactics that I've done? What have I had success? What should I do more of? Or maybe, what should I jetty and not consider anymore? Who can have a webinar or a conversation these days without talking about our global pandemic? And so here we are. And for many of us, our conversations were in person, whether it be, someone walking in the door, coming in for a tour. Things are different now. What have you seen or heard from, other industry professionals or some of your clients that they've used in lieu of the in-person conversations or attending trade shows or networking events? Are there any, oh, this is something that I experienced that I think, the group might benefit from, perhaps hearing about and implementing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously all of our worlds have changed. Like when we made the decision to move to Maui, we knew we were building a virtual business to some extent because we have a lot of clients on the mainland, and yeah, in the beginning we were getting on planes. Now we're not, haven't since March. So the opportunity to leverage technology to create those connections is obviously huge, and we're using one of them right now. I mean, video chatting, conferencing is huge, and some of the social media platforms are also huge, like LinkedIn and Instagram, and different ways to reach our clients and try to stay close to our clients. So I've seen, I'll tell you, before the pandemic, I would call clients. Now it's everything's Zoom, everything is video, and it almost feels like we're tighter because we can see our clients more than we used to even before the pandemic, unless we got on a plane. So I think that's been good. A lot of our clients are looking to do virtual sales kickoffs now. And one of my guys went to a virtual Tony Robbins thing, and it was 4 days, and it was like 12 hours a day for 4 days, and it was all virtual, and it was awesome. So I think our mindset needs to shift on what's possible leveraging virtual. And I mean, I've got the
Hmm.
green screen behind me and the HD cameras and all that stuff for trainings. And
Yeah.
really that to me is part of what we need to do. But you're right. Our cookbook's probably changing. We're not going to networking events. We're not going to trade shows. So the
Yeah.
question is, what can we do to generate the type of results we want? And then whatever that is, you're going to change your cookbook.
Yeah. One of the tactics you just mentioned was LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, there are so many elements to LinkedIn other than just following, liking, commenting, or sharing. In fact, you all at Sandler have a whole white page on best practices for using LinkedIn. Can you share with me some of your tips and tricks for LinkedIn that can help us grow our network of referrals, possible prospects? How can you use it in those different ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it depends on who your ideal client profile is too. If you're in a B2C world, then you're going to leverage LinkedIn differently than if you're in a B2B world. But at the
Yeah,
end of the day, you can see who other people know.
yeah,
So if you can see that, you can be more specific with asking for introductions and referrals. So, I mean, any person that's in a profession where you want to meet people, new people, the easiest way to do that is by asking for introductions and referrals. And I think that's become a scotoma for some salespeople because they don't believe they've earned the right to ask, or they don't have it as a goal, or they're not comfortable doing it. There's countless reasons why we shouldn't do it. But the reason why we should is because that's what's going to result in new meetings at a higher clip than any other behavior, more than likely.
right.
So if you can leverage LinkedIn or anything else to determine who you should be asking for introductions to, it's an extremely powerful tool. And for a lot of our clients, it's the number one approach to getting new meetings is by asking for introductions. And then LinkedIn becomes a vehicle for that.
Mhm. You also mentioned just now an ideal client profile, and it's making sure, obviously it's taking the time to step back and really thinking about who is your perfect ideal client profile. Do you have any tips, tricks, or suggestions, from your experiences that can help us, narrow down? One of the things that I learned is that I have multiple ideal client profiles for, different verticals that we operate in. So it's not necessarily just one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like, let's flip the table a little bit. Imagine you're trying to get a new job and you go to your friend, "Hey, Sue, I'm looking for a new job. Got any ideas?" And then you're so broad, it's like, what are you going to say? It's like, I don't know. Do you know what you even want to do? Versus saying, hey, I really want to work for Model 55. I noticed that you know Sue and Sharon. Would you mind making an intro? Because I think I would be great in their marketing department. So you're more likely going to get that introduction than you would if you just said, hey, do you have any ideas on where I should find a job? It's the same thing with not having an ideal client profile. If we don't know who we're going after, it's going to be hard for us to ask for help from
Yeah.
our clients, our peers, our friends. So knowing what that looks like, and it could be by vertical, it could be by client size, it could be by geography, it could be so many different ways you can determine who your ideal client is. And then after you know what it is, then within that ideal client, you're going to want to understand those buying personas of the people that you want to reach out to. Like,
Mm,
who inside those clients are you talking to? And
right.
go from there.
Yeah. Um, Sandler has a lot of rules, Sandler-isms. There are like 70 something Sandler rules. And, guiding principles. What is your favorite one? And what does it mean to you?
Oh man, my go-to is, you're right, there's a ton of them. Mine happens to
Yeah.
be rule number 44, which is if your foot hurts, you're probably standing on your own toe.
Can you expand on that and take us through like a
Yeah.
situation?
Yeah, I mean, especially with salespeople and business leaders, there needs to be an intellectual humility there where you can determine where you're messing up. I mean, mistakes are part of success. They're not the opposite of it. So when we fail, assuming we keep going, then it leads to success. So there's times where we're doing stuff that is detrimental to our own success. So we're hurting ourselves somehow. So if our foot hurts, then we might be standing on our own toe, which to me also is empowering because it says I'm in control. I can actually take my foot off my own toe. So there's things that I can do to improve and make my life better. And to me, it's not being done to us. Like I think a lot of times we can look at the weather and be like, man, it's raining out. And I had a boss once that told me, Pete, that's weather. Just put an umbrella up and keep going. So that's what that rule says to me. It's like, okay, yep, I'm causing my own problem here, but I'm self-recognizing that. I'm honest with myself, and then I'm going to fix it. So that's my favorite rule.
Yeah. One of mine is the best presentation is the one that you never have to give. And I think that that really encapsulates the whole digging deep in the pain funnel. I think that's such a huge part of it, is really asking questions and allowing the prospect, it's almost like a self-discovery for them. You know, you ask and then they go on that journey through the pain funnel. And at the end of the day, you don't need to give them the big, you know, Broadway production. They've already gotten to the award show on their own because they figured out, oh, this is, you know, this is my pain. I mean, I can remember when we first met, pretty much we met and Sharon, our CEO, was like, okay, you know, sign me up. We're good to go. Because you helped us explore on our own sort of how we're currently doing things, how we could do things differently and be better at it. So that's one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a client that comes to you and says, man, I know I want to do business with you, but I don't know why yet. I don't even know what you do. Then you probably had a pretty good discovery step, more than likely.
Right. Right. There you go. I know we talk a lot about, in terms of the parent-child behavior, about being a critical parent, being a nurturing parent, and then, you know, being in that childlike state. Can you share that with the group, the differences and how to be cognizant of it?
Yeah. So this is a psychological study by a guy named Dr. Eric Byrne, and he talks about what's called transactional analysis. And we have these scripts that happen, and they're transactions, and they either happen in one of three ego states. And we all have them as humans. There's the adult ego state, the parent ego state, and the child ego state. So decisions are made in the child ego state. It's when we say to ourselves, I really want something. So you're trying to either avoid pain or seek out pleasure. And that's when we've decided we're going to do something different. But it doesn't end there. All of a sudden, the adult kicks in and the parent kicks in. So the adult starts rationalizing the decision. And I think we've all done that. We bought something, we get it home, and then we're like, did I really need that? Should I bring it back? So that's what the adult's doing. They're basically rationalizing the decision, and then the parent scrutinizes it. Sometimes we're critical with ourselves, and that's the way our brain works. So imagine, like, I'm a parent. I've got two little girls, 7 and 8 years old, and I asked them to do something in a fairly critical way. Like, Elena, you didn't clean your room. Go clean your room. And I go critical parent on Elena. We all know what our kids do when we go critical parent on them. They go rebellious child. Not only they don't clean it, they make it worse. because that's what we do. Somebody goes critical parent, the natural reaction to that is for somebody else to go rebellious child. So there's certain transactions that occur that are either support our ability to build relationships with our clients, and there's others that do the exact opposite. So there's another Sandler rule, like leave your child in the car.
Yeah.
So but if you're going to do that, you got to roll the windows down a little bit. So just so everybody knows, I'm not saying leave your child in the car. That's all I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's no room for your child on a sales call. We need to be in the adult or the nurturing parent. So that basically means we're talking about facts and figures. We're empathetic. We actually care what's going on, but we're not going to go critical on them. We're not going to be like, Sue, your facility is by far the ugliest thing I've ever seen. I can't believe your design is this bad. Like, we're not going to go critical on them. We're going to go nurturing parent. We're going to say, I appreciate the fact you're trying to improve your image. You're not alone. It's great that you're trying to modernize. How are you hoping it could look? So now you're in the adult or the nurturing parent. So that, in short, I mean, we could spend hours talking about that topic, but basically that's it, is determining which ego state you're in and then acting accordingly.
Yeah. Let's be clear, we can spend hours on each topic. I mean, we didn't even chip the surface. There is so much content, and they're like juicy topics that there's so much more to them. Before we get to the open question period, I did want to go ahead and ask one additional question, and that has to do with, oh my God, just left my head. Snap. Pete, we were just talking about the parent. Oh yeah, staying ahead, the pendulum.
Yeah.
That's an interesting topic, the pendulum theory, where staying just on the other side of no.
Okay. So,
and it's something that I am not good at.
So well, the fact that you just said that means you are good at it. But anyway, so this is not a 1 minute topic, but here, if you picture a pendulum like on a clock, and then 3 o'clock means it's sold, and then 9 o'clock means it's over. Our first goal is to make sure the pendulum is swinging, because everything in motion stays in motion. Okay. The other rule is an equal and opposite reaction. Every action creates an equal and opposite reaction. So if you want to get the deal to it's sold, which is 3 o'clock, the goal is to never be on the right side of the pendulum. We want to stay just to the left, because people love to buy, but they hate to be sold to. So we're never going to say out loud, what's it going to take for you to get in this car today? Because that means we're on the right side of the pendulum. We're trying to pull them to it's sold. We're going to be on the left side. And if somebody says, wow, this looks interesting, I think we want to move forward, we're not going to say, press hard, third copy's yours. We're going to say, I appreciate you sharing that with me. When you say, let's move forward, can you share with me what you mean by that? So we're just staying to the left of where the client is, so then they can take the deal to it's closed. So that's pendulum theory. It's very complicated, but very effective if you use it the right way. Excellent.
Well, we're approaching our last 15 minutes, so I wanted to have an opportunity to throw it open for some questions. So if anyone has any, please feel to throw them into the chat feature, and I can start answering. One of the questions is, will we be able to get a recording? Absolutely, yes. We will be sending it out after to the attendees. Another question that we are getting is regarding decision making. A lot of people are just looking. What techniques could you share with us that will help our sales teams, our leasing agents in the field, to understand, are they ready to make a decision? Are they committed to making a decision? What could you share with us?
Well, there's So there's three main qualification steps to the Sandler process. It starts with the client's reason for doing anything different, which is their pain or their goals. So we have to understand that first. And if we know what their challenges are, that in and of itself is going to help us determine how important it is for them to act and fix the challenge. So then when we get to the decision-making step, we want to understand whether or not it's a big enough challenge for them to actually do something different. So if
Mhm.
somebody says, I'm just looking, to me, the pendulum's not moving yet. They're even keel. So big question is, well, what does that actually mean? Because you're in blue sky. You're not even on the iceberg of pain. You're up blue sky land somewhere. So we've got to get a real conversation going about what just looking means. Makes sense. You don't fight them on it. It's not like you say, no, you're not. I know you want to do something. Just tell me the truth now. We're going to say, makes sense. Help me understand what that process looks like. What are you looking for? And then at some point, it's going to go from intellectual to emotional. And that's when you know you're entering the pain funnel. But if it
Yeah.
stays intellectual in the just looking phase, we don't really have anything yet. So if there's something there and there's enough trust and rapport, then you would hope that at some point they're going to open up, which is
Mm.
why that relationship building trust factor has to be there first before we get the truth on what they're looking for.
Right. So for those who are still in that intellectual phase, keep them in your nurture and your tickle file because they're not committed to making a change.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't fight it. It makes sense. You're not alone. How can I help?
Yeah.
And it's the same conversation. You're just not starting from a place of pain. So after you get a little bit of emotion going, which is probably there anyway, you just haven't earned the right to hear what it actually is, then
Right.
you're in a good place.
Right. You talked about this a little bit earlier, but for some folks who might be joining a little bit later, um, asking for referrals. It's for some folks, it is uncomfortable. However, not however, in this industry where, you know, word of mouth is huge. Could you share some, you know, maybe talk tracks that make it a little less intimidating to ask for referrals in both a B2B or a B2C capacity?
Yeah. I'll give you, we're big on acronyms over here, Sue, as you know, right? So I'll give you an acronym. It's SEAM, SEAM. So
Mm-hmm.
the S stands for stroke, which is a compliment. So Sue, I really appreciate the fact that you've decided to put your dad in our facility, right? Um, and then E is experience, and then A is ask. So in our experience, our best residents come from our residents. I'm curious, is there anybody that you know that lives within 10, 15, 20 minutes of here that is thinking about making a similar life change that you made? And the M is match. So you're matching it to their world. So the E is in my experience, then the A is actually asking, and then M is the match to their world. One of the biggest reason why we don't get introductions is because we don't ask. So if you remember one of those four letters, remember the A.
Yeah.
But the second biggest reason why we don't get the intros is because it's not specific to their world. So we want to match it to their world. And then the experience in the S part is just creating comfort.
Understood. And then another one goes back to sort of activity. Um, are there, I mean, it really does depend on the industry that you're in, but do you have any benchmarks for like activity and ratios? So like if I make on average 100 phone calls, I can expect to get X responses. Do you have
Yeah,
any industry or general guidelines that would help to create benchmarks for success of activity?
yeah, we do. We have a lot of that, but it's so industry specific that it's hard for me to give you actual numbers. But I'll tell you the process you can go through to figure it out for yourself is
That'd be
track
great.
it. It's track it.
Yeah. You're funny,
So if
Pete.
you ask for 10 referrals, how many times do they actually give you one? And then create your own ratio.
Right.
So as long as you're doing the behavior that's double the amount of your typical sales cycle, you'll have your actual ratios. So let's pretend you have an average sales cycle of 1 month. Then do the behavior for 2 months and then determine your baseline for your ratios. And then you're going to get your cold call ratio, if you're lucky, is going to be 1 in 100
Mm-hmm.
will turn into clients.
Yep.
Your ratio for asking for introductions and referrals could be 1 in 2, could be 1 in 10, but it's going to be way better than 1 in 100.
Got it.
And then everything
Great.
else falls somewhere in the middle.
Right. Well, I think we are close to being out of time. And I can certainly go through any additional questions and answer those offline. But Pete, I wanted to thank you. It really was a wealth of information. And, you know, I'd like to say that it really is the tip of the iceberg. And, you know, for those of us who are out there selling, it the world of Sandler has definitely turned the process upside down. It's made me think very differently on how to approach it. And I thank you for sharing your wisdom with all of us today. And are there any last, you know, words, closing remarks that you'd like to add, Pete?
So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and the folks on the webinar. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just Google Peter Oliver on SaleFish, SaleFish on LinkedIn, and feel free to link in with me there. Or we also host a podcast. It's called Emerge on Purpose, and it's for emerging leaders. So if you're interested in podcasts, those are pretty fun 20-minute podcasts to help us all become better leaders. So any way you want to help, let us know. The Sandler Network is very broad, but happy to assist in any way we can.
Sounds great. Well, thank you, Pete, and thank you everyone else for spending the last, you know, few minutes with us. I hope you have a great day. Talk soon.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.